When I was 12 years old, I fractured my foot playing soccer. I didn't tell my parents when I got home that night because the next day, my dad was taking me to see a movie, a soccer movie. I worried that if I told my parents about the foot, they would take me to see a doctor. I didn't want to see a doctor, I wanted to see the movie. The next morning, my dad goes, "It's nice out. Why don't we walk to the theater?" It was a mile away. As we go, he says, "Why are you limping?" I tell him I have something in my shoe. The movie was spectacular. I was ecstatic. At the end of the movie, I told my dad about the foot. He took me to see an orthopedic doctor who put my foot in a cast for 3 weeks. I tell you the story today because 4 decades later, I don't really consider myself a soccer fan anymore. Today, my sports fandom is tuned to another kind of football. Now, my 12-year-old self wouldn't just find this incomprehensible. My 12-year-old self would see this as a betrayal. Now, you might say we all change from the time we're 12, so let me fast forward a decade. When I was 22, I was a freshly minted electronics engineer in southern India. I had no idea that 3 decades later I would be living in the United States, that I would be a journalist, and that I would be the host of a podcast called Hidden Brain. So my future was not just unknown, it was unknowable. When we look backwards, we can see enormous changes in who we have become. But when we look forwards, we tend to imagine that we're going to be the same people in the future. We don't imagine that we ourselves will have different perspectives, different views, different preferences in the future. I call this the illusion of continuity. And I think one reason this happens is that when we look backwards, the contrast with our prior selves to who we are today is so clear. We can see it so clearly that we have become different people. When we look forward, we can imagine ourselves being a little older, a little grayer, but we don't imagine fundamentally that we're going to have a different outlook or a different perspective, that we're going to be different people. Philosophers have talked for many years about a thought experiment. It's sometimes called the ship of Theseus. The great warrior Theseus returned from his exploits. His ship was stationed in the harbor as a memorial. And over the decades, parts of the ship began to rot and decay, and as this happened, planks were replaced by new planks, until eventually every part of the ship of Theseus was built from something new. And philosophers, starting with Plato, have asked the question, if every part of the ship of Theseus is new, is this still the ship of Theseus? You and I are walking examples of the ship of Theseus. Our cells turn over all the time. The people you were 10 years ago are not the people you are today. Biologically, you have become a different person. Each new layer that's put down is not identical to the one that came before it. On an ongoing basis, you are constantly becoming a new person. This has profound consequences for so many different aspects of our lives. I have the illusion that 12-year-old Shankar who wanted to be a soccer star, and 52-year-old Shankar who is the podcast host, and 82-year-old Shankar who will hopefully be living one day on a beautiful beach, that these are all the same person. Is that really true? Let's set aside the philosophical questions for another day, and let me tell you about some of the practical challenges of this problem. When we make promises to other people, when we promise to love someone till death do us part, we are making a promise that a stranger is going to have to keep. Our future selves might not share our views, our perspectives, our hopes. When we lock people up and throw away the key, it's not just that the people we imprison are going to be different in 30 years from now. We are going to be different 30 years from now. Our need for retribution, for vengeance, might not be what it is today.